What if I told you that the myth of the dark and cold Middle Ages is just a misconception? We imagine knights chattering their teeth in huge stone halls, where the only source of heat is a smoldering fire. But the truth is much more complex and technological. Hidden beneath the floors of monasteries and within the thick walls of castles, there existed a whole science of heating based on ancient knowledge and remarkable ingenuity. It was a quiet revolution that allowed people to survive and even thrive in harsh climates. Medieval engineers knew how to control hot air and smoke, creating systems that we would today call central heating. They built warm floors, heated walls, and invented incredibly efficient stoves. Watch the video to the end to learn how medieval engineers created heating systems that even some modern homes would envy. Are you ready to learn the truth about how people really lived in medieval castles? The most common image of medieval life is a huge banquet hall with an open hearth right in the middle. This hearth was indeed the social center of life, a place where the whole family and household gathered. People ate, discussed business, and spent long evenings around it. However, as a heating device, it was extremely inefficient and inconvenient. Most of the heat simply escaped upward through a special opening in the roof called a louver. The main problem with this type of hearth was the smoke that filled the entire room. Although there was an opening in the roof, the draft was weak and the acrid smoke hung under the ceiling before finding its way outside. The walls and beams quickly became covered with a thick layer of soot. People in the hall constantly breathed in the products of combustion. This created an unhealthy atmosphere and spoiled the interior decoration, however modest it was. The efficiency of such heating was minimal. The heat spread mainly by radiation, so only those sitting in close proximity to the fire could warm themselves. As soon as you moved a few meters away, the temperature dropped sharply. In the huge stone halls of castles, this meant that most of the space remained freezing cold. There was a sharp contrast between the scorching heat of the fire and the piercing cold near the walls. Another serious problem was drafts. The hole in the roof for smoke to escape also served as an entrance for cold air. In addition, windows in the early Middle Ages were often just openings covered with wooden shutters or oiled cloth. This created a constant movement of cold air across the floor, which negated most of the heat from the hearth. People were forced to wrap themselves in furs and wool even indoors. The location of the hearth in the center of the hall also dictated the entire architecture and way of life. It took up valuable space and made it impossible to divide the large hall into smaller, more secluded rooms. All life took place in full view of everyone, in one common space. It was a dormitory, not a private home as we understand it. The concept of privacy was impossible in such an architectural paradigm. There were attempts to improve this system. Sometimes a special cap was built over the hearth to help collect smoke better. But even that did not solve the main problem. Low efficiency and drafts. People were forced to put up with smoke for warmth and cold for fresh air. This compromise was the basis of life in early medieval dwellings. The social consequences were also significant. A place by the fire was a privilege, and it was occupied by the lord and his family. The rest of the household and servants were located further away in the cold part of the hall. Warmth was a symbol of status. This injustice was built into the very structure of the house and reflected the hierarchy of society at that time. The stone floor remained icy all year round. To provide some warmth, the floors were covered with straw or reeds. This layer did provide some insulation, of course, but it also became dirty quickly. It had to be changed frequently, but in between changes, it became a breeding ground for unpleasant odors and unsanitary conditions. It gradually became clear that the open central hearth was a dead end. It could not provide adequate comfort in the worsening climate known as the Little Ice Age. New, more complex, and effective solutions were needed. The engineering minds of the time began to look for a way out, turning to forgotten technologies of the past. This system was so imperfect that it seems surprising how people survived in such conditions at all. However, it was this imperfection that became the engine of progress. We are very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about this compromise between warmth and clean air? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. To understand how amazing the engineering achievements of medieval monks were, it is worth remembering that many of these technologies were borrowed from the bygone era of the Roman Empire. Despite its political and social catastrophe, Rome left behind not only architectural wonders, but also technologies that continued to live on for centuries. One of Rome's greatest engineering achievements was the hypocaust, a central heating system. This complex and ingenious technology did not disappear without a trace with the fall of the empire, but was preserved and passed on to future generations, primarily in medieval monasteries. Monasteries became repositories of knowledge, including the works of Roman architects and engineers such as Vitruvius, whose writings dealt not only with architectural theory, but also with practical solutions for creating comfortable and safe living spaces. It was in these monasteries, in their rich and culturally developed centers, such as Cluny in France and St. Gallen in Switzerland, that monks with access to ancient texts and skilled craftsmen were able to revive the engineering marvel of the Roman era, the hypocaust. The hypocaust was an ingenious heating system that significantly improved comfort in cold winters. The system included a space under the floor on which a stone or ceramic floor was laid, raised on a series of columns called pilae. These pillars created air channels through which hot air circulated. This system created a steady heat that spread evenly throughout the room, providing gentle and comfortable warmth. The heat source, prefernium, was a large furnace, usually located in the basement or next to the heated room. The furnace was heated with coal or wood, and the hot gases and smoke from it entered the space under the floor, where they slowly and evenly transferred their heat to stone or ceramic slabs. This created a comfortable atmosphere, while the air in the room remained clean, as the smoke was vented outside through a system of pipes and channels. Hypocausts provided not only warmth, but also unique cleanliness in the room. Since the combustion products were removed through special vertical channels called tubuli, made of ceramic pipes, which in turn heated the walls, the system also contributed to efficient heating and improved microclimate. Importantly, smoke and fumes did not enter the room, and people received even gentle heat while the air remained fresh. It was a true radiant heating system, which in essence became the prototype for modern underfloor heating. In the early Middle Ages, it was difficult to restore such complex heating systems, as this required considerable resources, knowledge, and stability, which were lacking in most regions of Europe. However, in large and wealthy monasteries such as Cluny and St. Gallen, monks were able to bring this Roman technology back to life with the help of ancient texts and their own craftsmanship. Monastic hypocausts were generally not as complex or large-scale as their Roman predecessors. They did not heat entire villas or huge buildings, but only a few key rooms, such as dormitories where monks slept or hospitals. For monks, a stable temperature was critically important in winter, when the cold could pose a threat to their health and lives. Warm floors allowed monks to pray and work peacefully on long winter evenings without suffering from the cold coming from the stone floor. Interestingly, hypocaust technology did not disappear only in monasteries. Some wealthy medieval castles, such as Malbork Castle, the residence of the Teutonic Order, also used complex heating systems inspired by Roman models. In these castles, huge furnaces in the basements heated the air, which was then fed through channels to key rooms in the castle. It was not just a furnace, but a real heated ventilation system designed to heat large rooms, such as reception halls and bedrooms. However, despite its successes, the hypocaust system, like any technology, had its limitations. Monks, for example, faced a problem that the hypocaust could not solve: how to heat the library without damaging the ancient manuscripts that were spread out on the floor. Solving this problem was an important step in the development of heating technology. The monks found a way to direct heat directly into the walls, creating the world's first radiant wall heating system. Heating walls using channels through which hot air was circulated. This solved the problem of damage to manuscripts and at the same time improved the heating of the rooms. This technological feat shows that the gap between antiquity and the Middle Ages was not as deep as historians often assume. Instead of simply forgetting about ancient technologies, monasteries became their guardians and transformers. Knowledge of hypocausts, like many other Roman engineering achievements, not only survived the Middle Ages but was also adapted to new conditions, allowing it to be preserved and passed on to future generations. Which Roman technology do you think would have been the most important for the Middle Ages? And what would you like to know about other Roman achievements that survived into the Middle Ages? What I am about to show you was a technology that was centuries ahead of its time. In monasteries, there was one room that required a special approach to heating, the scriptorium. It was a library and workshop where monks spent hours copying precious manuscripts. A conventional hypocaust with warm floors was not suitable here. Direct heat from below could damage the parchment and ink, causing them to dry out and crack. In addition, manuscripts were often stored in special cabinets standing against the walls. An open fire was unthinkable because of the risk of fire. Smoke from the hearth could ruin the pages. A solution was needed that would provide gentle, even, and safe heat, and most importantly, dryness, which was critical for preserving books in a damp stone building. It was here that medieval engineers showed incredible ingenuity, improving on the Roman idea. They decided to use the walls for heating instead of the floor. To do this, they revived and modified the Roman tubuli, ceramic channels. But now these channels did not just remove smoke, they became an active heating system. It worked as follows. A furnace was located in the basement or in an adjacent room. Hot air and smoke from it were directed not under the floor, but into specially constructed cavities inside the walls of the scriptorium. These cavities were either filled with ceramic pipes or formed a complex labyrinth of brick-lined channels. The walls were transformed into one large radiator. The stone masonry of the walls heated slowly and evenly from the inside. Then it began to radiate gentle heat into the room. It was the perfect solution. The temperature in the scriptorium was kept stable, without sudden changes. More importantly, the warm walls actively combated dampness, drying the air and protecting the manuscripts from mold. Such systems have been found in a number of European monasteries, for example, in Switzerland and Germany. They testify to a deep understanding of the physics of heat transfer. The monk engineers understood the difference between convection, which raises dust, and radiation, which warms objects and people in a room. For fragile manuscripts, radiant heat was the only correct solution. Building such a system was incredibly complex. It required precise calculations when erecting walls to ensure proper draft and even heating. A mistake in the design could result in smoke entering the room or the wall heating unevenly. It was truly advanced engineering for its time. This technology was elite, accessible only to the wealthiest and most educated communities. It required not only money, but also knowledge that was passed down within monastic construction guilds. It was a real professional secret that was carefully guarded. Knowledge of how to build a breathable, warm wall was worth its weight in gold. We see that monks were not only guardians of texts, but also practicing engineers. They did not simply copy Roman models, but creatively reinterpreted them, adapting them to their specific needs. The wall heating system in Scriptoria is perhaps the pinnacle of medieval heating technology, combining efficiency, safety, and concern for the preservation of knowledge. It was not just heating, it was a climate control system for priceless knowledge. If you like learning about such unusual solutions for survival, please like this video. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos about how people actually survived in the Middle Ages. Are you ready for the shocking truth about a seemingly simple invention? Moving the open hearth from the center of the room to the wall and adding a chimney was one of the greatest revolutions in the history of architecture and everyday life. This seemingly simple solution, which appeared around the 12th century, completely changed the way people lived. The fireplace was not just an improved version of the hearth, it created a new social reality. The main innovation was the chimney, a vertical channel inside the wall that carried smoke directly outside, high above the roof. This solved the main problem of the open hearth. The room was finally free of acrid smoke and soot. People could breathe clean air, and the interior was no longer covered in soot. The elimination of smoke allowed architects to take a fresh look at space. There was no longer a need for a huge common room with a hole in the ceiling. It was now possible to build multi-story buildings. Fireplaces could be built into the walls on any floor, from the basement to the attic. This led to the birth of multi-story castles and houses. With the advent of efficient and safe heating for individual rooms, the social structure also changed. The concept of privacy emerged. The lord and his family could leave the noisy and crowded common hall and retreat to their private quarters, called solar. In these rooms, heated by their own fireplace, they could sleep, read, and enjoy their private lives. A fireplace against the wall was also more efficient in terms of heat engineering. Although it still lost a lot of heat through the chimney, its design allowed it to better direct radiant heat into the room. The back wall of the fireplace heated up and became a source of heat itself. People could sit in front of the fire, warming themselves without the risk of suffocating from the smoke. This invention spread slowly but surely. Initially, fireplaces were only found in the richest castles and monasteries. Their construction required the high skill of masons. But by the late Middle Ages, they began to appear in the homes of wealthy townspeople, completely changing the appearance of urban dwellings. Fireplaces also became an element of decor and status. They were decorated with stone carvings, heraldic symbols, and expensive portals. The size and decoration of the fireplace spoke of the wealth and status of the owner of the house. The mantelpiece became a place to display the most valuable items. Of course, the fireplace had its drawbacks. It still created strong drafts, drawing cold air into the room through cracks in windows and doors. Fuel combustion efficiency was low, but compared to a smoky fire in the middle of the hall, it was an incredible breakthrough. This transition from hearth to fireplace took several centuries. It was not a momentary event, but rather a slow evolution. But its consequences were profound. It did not just heat the medieval home, it completely rebuilt it, dividing it into rooms and floors and giving people something they had never had before: personal space. Thus, the invention of the chimney was not just a technical improvement, it was a social shift that allowed medieval society to move toward greater individualization. It laid the foundation for the home we live in today. But even the fireplace was not the limit of engineering thought. In the next chapter, you will learn how Central and Eastern Europe created a heating device that was many times more efficient than any fireplace. How long do you think it took to heat a stone castle with fireplaces? While Western Europe was perfecting fireplaces, Central and Eastern Europe took a different path, creating one of the most efficient heating devices in history. We are talking about a massive ceramic stove, known in Germany as a kachelofen, and in Slavic lands as a Russian stove or grubka. This invention was a real heat battery, capable of accumulating and slowly releasing heat. The main secret of this stove lay in its design. It was not just a firebox, but a complex labyrinth of smoke channels hidden inside a massive brick or stone body. The body of the stove was often lined with special ceramic tiles, which not only decorated the stove, but also improved its heat transfer. These tiles were true works of art. The principle of operation was based on heat accumulation. The wood burned in a small firebox, and the hot gases, before entering the chimney, passed through a long and winding path through the internal channels of the stove. Moving through this labyrinth, they gave off almost all their heat to the massive brick or ceramic masonry. By the time it reached the chimney, the smoke was barely warm, which indicated a very high efficiency coefficient. The accumulated heat was slowly and evenly radiated into the room. A massive stove, heated once or twice a day, could maintain a comfortable temperature for 24 hours. This was incomparably more economical than any fireplace, which only provided heat while the fire was burning and required constant replenishment of firewood. The ceramic stove completely changed everyday life. It became the real heart of the home. Not only was food cooked on it, but people also slept on it. In addition, the stove solved the problem of drafts inherent in fireplaces. Since the combustion process was separated from the heat transfer process, the stove did not require such an intense influx of cold air. The air in the room remained warm and still. This created a much more comfortable microclimate in the room. The construction of such a stove was a complex art, mastered by special stove builders. They had to accurately calculate the length and cross-section of the smoke channels to ensure good draft and maximum heat transfer. An error in the calculations could result in the stove smoking or heating poorly. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation. Such stoves came in different sizes, from small Dutch ovens that heated one room to giant stoves in castles and palaces that were built into the walls and could heat several rooms at once. In some cases, the stove's firebox was located in a corridor or basement so that dirt from the firewood would not get into the living quarters. The ceramic tiles covering the stove were not just decoration. Their embossed surface increased the heat transfer area, and the glaze made the stove easy to maintain. The green, blue, and brown tones of the tiles created a cozy atmosphere and served as an indicator of the homeowner's wealth. The kakelofen was so efficient that this principle is still used in modern stoves. It proves that medieval craftsmen intuitively understood the laws of thermodynamics. They were able to create a device that used fuel as efficiently as possible, which was critically important given the limited forest resources. Thus, the ceramic stove became the pinnacle of medieval heating technology for residential buildings. It combined economy, safety, comfort, and even performed many household functions. It was not just a heating device, but a whole multifunctional complex that ensured the survival of the family. What if I told you that medieval castles actually had systems that could be called central heating? We have already talked about hypocausts in monasteries, but in the late Middle Ages, similar, albeit modified, systems began to appear in large castles. This was especially true of the castles of the Teutonic Order, for example in Malberg, or in some residences in the Alps. Engineers were faced with the task of heating huge stone spaces. The basis of such a system was one or more huge furnaces located in the basement floors. These furnaces, called calorifiers, were real thermal stations. They burned huge amounts of wood, heating a large mass of stones or brickwork inside the furnace itself. It was a kind of heat accumulator. A complex system of channels ran from this central furnace, laid inside thick walls and underfloors. These channels were not for smoke, but for clean air. Cold air was taken in from outside, passed through a special chamber where it came into contact with the hot surfaces of the furnace and was heated. Then, under the action of natural convection, this warm air rose up through the channels. The warm air entered the living quarters, large halls, dining rooms, and the commander's chambers, through special openings in the floor walls. These openings were often covered with decorative metal grills. In this way, heated clean air was supplied to the rooms, where it mixed with the room air, raising the overall temperature. This system was much safer than open fires in fireplaces. It prevented smoke from entering the living quarters and reduced the risk of fire. All the dirty work involved in maintaining the furnace, loading wood, cleaning ash, took place in the basement without disturbing the castle's inhabitants. This was a huge step forward in terms of comfort and hygiene. Of course, such a system could not provide modern room temperatures. In huge halls, it rather made the cold less unbearable, raising the temperature by a few degrees, but even that was a huge achievement. Combined with other methods, such as fireplaces and tapestries, it allowed people to survive the winter in relative comfort. These systems were the pinnacle of engineering thought of their time and cost a fortune. Only the most powerful and wealthy organizations, such as knightly orders or royal courts, could afford them. They were a symbol of power and technological superiority, demonstrating man's ability to subdue the elements. Today, when we look at the ruins of such castles, we often see only bare stones. But behind this apparent simplicity lie complex engineering networks. The ventilation holes in the floor, which tourists mistake for something incomprehensible, were actually part of a complex heating system. This proves that our ancestors were far from as primitive as we tend to think. Building such systems was an incredibly difficult task, but the logistics were no less complex. In the next chapter, we will talk about where the fuel for all these stoves and fireplaces came from. How difficult do you think it was to maintain such a gigantic furnace? All these complex heating systems, from fireplaces to hypocausts, would have been useless without one key resource: fuel. Supplying castles, monasteries, and cities with sufficient firewood or coal was one of the most difficult logistical challenges of the Middle Ages. Heat literally had to be extracted and delivered, often from far away and with great difficulty. Wood was the main source of fuel throughout most of the Middle Ages. The demand for it was enormous. A large castle with several fireplaces and possibly a central stove could burn several cartloads of wood a day. This required the constant work of woodcutters and carters. The forests around large cities and castles were quickly cut down. To solve this problem, an entire forestry industry was developed. In order not to destroy the forests completely, selective and renewable forest management was practiced. Thinning and pollarding methods were widely used, where branches were cut from trees without touching the trunk, or part of the forest was cut down, allowing it to regenerate. This ensured a constant supply of wood. The right to collect firewood in the forest, or stover, was an important medieval privilege. Peasants were often allowed to collect fallen trees or cut a certain amount of branches for their own needs. But commercial harvesting of wood for sale in the city or for the needs of the Lord was strictly regulated. Wood was a valuable strategic resource. In industries that required very high and stable temperatures, such as blacksmithing or glassmaking, firewood was ineffective. This is where charcoal came in handy. It was obtained by slowly burning wood in special pits or furnaces with limited air access. This process was long, dirty, and required great skill. Charcoal burners lived and worked in forests, far from settlements. Their work was hard and thankless, but vital to the medieval economy. Charcoal was lighter than wood, burned hotter, and produced almost no smoke. It was easier to transport over long distances, so it became an important commodity. In some regions where forests were depleted and demand for fuel was growing, fossil coal began to be used. In England, for example, sea coal, so called because it was found on the coast or delivered by sea, began to be mined in the Newcastle area as early as the 13th century. London was one of the first cities to face the problem of coal smog. Fossil coal burned hot but emitted a lot of sulfur and soot. Its smell was unpleasant, and at first it was used only in smithies and workshops. Transporting fuel was a separate problem. Firewood and coal are bulky and heavy loads. They were transported by carts on poor roads, or, much cheaper and more efficient, floated down rivers on barges. Control of river routes often meant control of fuel supplies to large cities. This logistical chain, from the lumberjack or miner to the fireplace in the castle, was complex and vulnerable. Bad weather, river flooding, or military action could interrupt supplies, leaving an entire city without heat in the middle of winter. Therefore, fuel reserves were made in advance, and large wood stores were as important a part of a castle as food stores. Thus, the science of heating involved not only engineering solutions, but also complex economics and logistics. Survival in winter depended on the coordinated work of hundreds of people: lumberjacks, coal miners, carters, and rivermen. Heat in a medieval home was the result not only of ingenious design, but also of hard daily labor. Creating heat was only half the battle. The second and equally important half was retaining it. The huge stone walls of castles were excellent accumulators of cold. Without proper insulation, any heat generated by a fireplace or stove would dissipate almost instantly. Medieval people understood this perfectly well and developed a whole system to retain precious heat. The main and most famous element of this system was, of course, tapestries. We are used to perceiving them as objects of art and luxury, but in the Middle Ages, their main function was purely practical. Heavy woolen tapestries hung on cold stone walls were the main line of defense against the cold. The tapestry worked as a multi-layered insulator. First, the thick woolen fabric itself prevented heat exchange. Second, and perhaps even more importantly, there was a gap between the tapestry and the wall. This layer of still air served as an excellent heat insulator, using the same principle we use today in double-glazed windows. Tapestries were mobile insulation. They could be easily removed, cleaned, and transported to another castle, which was very convenient for traveling courts. In summer, they were often removed, and in winter, they were returned to their place. The cost of such products was enormous. They were valued on a par with jewelry and were an indicator of the highest status. Another important way to insulate walls was with wooden paneling. In the later Middle Ages, the walls of living rooms in wealthy houses and castles began to be covered with carved wooden panels. Like tapestries, the panels created an air gap and prevented the room from cooling down quickly. Wood feels much warmer than stone, which created additional psychological comfort. Windows were another weak point. In the early Middle Ages, glass was rare and incredibly expensive. Window openings were covered with wooden shutters, which of course protected against the wind, but plunged the room into complete darkness. Sometimes oiled cloth or thin plates of horn were used, which allowed a little dim light to pass through. With the spread of glass production, windows became more common, but they were not airtight double-glazed windows. They were small pieces of glass held together by lead bridges. Such stained glass windows let in light, but also drafts. Therefore, an integral attribute of any window was heavy, thick curtains, which were closed at night to cut off the flow of cold air. The floors also required attention. We have already mentioned straw and reeds in the common rooms. In the more luxurious rooms, carpets were laid on stone slabs. Carpets, often imported from the East, were another luxury item that served a practical purpose. They insulated the floor and made walking on it more pleasant. Architectural planning also took the cold into account. The most important living rooms, such as the Lord's solar, were placed on the upper floors and on the south side of the building. This allowed them to receive maximum sunlight and heat. The size of the rooms was also important. Small rooms were much easier to heat and keep warm than huge halls. Furniture also contributed to the fight against the cold. The high backs of benches and armchairs protected those sitting from the drafts that swept across the floor. Alcoves and niches in the walls created warmer microzones. The entire interior was designed to create small islands of comfort in a large and cold space. This entire insulation system, tapestries, panels, curtains, carpets, created a room within a room. It was a kind of textile cocoon that protected people from the cold stone walls. Without these measures, no stoves or fireplaces could have provided an acceptable standard of living in a medieval castle. Even with fireplaces and tapestries, the overall temperature in medieval rooms in winter was very low, often no higher than 10 to 12 degrees. Therefore, the main survival strategy was not so much to heat the entire space as to heat the person directly. Medieval clothing and daily habits were ideally suited for this purpose. The basis of the wardrobe was layering. People wore several layers of clothing made of natural materials, primarily wool. Wool has excellent thermal insulation properties and keeps you warm even when wet. Linen underwear absorb moisture, while the upper layers of wool retain body heat. Winter clothes were heavy and long. Long tunics, cloaks, and mantles covered the body down to the heels, preventing heat from escaping. People wore hats even indoors, as a lot of heat is lost through the head. Fur trim on collars and cuffs also served not only as decoration, but also as additional protection from the cold. One of the most ingenious inventions for retaining heat was the bed. A medieval bed in a wealthy home was not just a place to sleep, but a real fortress against the cold. We are talking about the famous four-poster bed with heavy curtains. It was, in essence, a room within a room. At night, thick wool or velvet curtains were drawn on all four sides of the bed. In this enclosed space, measuring only a few cubic meters, the heat from the breath of one or more sleeping people quickly raised the temperature. Inside such a cocoon, it was much warmer than in the rest of the room. Mattresses were stuffed with down or wool, which also provided excellent insulation from below. People slept under several layers of heavy woolen and fur blankets. Often, special warmers were taken to bed, metal or ceramic vessels filled with hot water or hot coals. The habit of sleeping together was dictated not only by lack of space, but also by considerations of warmth. Adults and servants often slept several people in one bed, warming each other. This was a common practice that did not have the connotations we might attribute to it today. Portable braziers or barbecues were used for local heating during the day. These were metal bowls on legs filled with hot charcoal. They could be carried from room to room and placed at the feet to keep warm while working or reading. However, they were dangerous because they emitted carbon monoxide and required good ventilation. There were also personal hand warmers. Ladies and monks carried small, often richly decorated metal boxes with smoldering coals inside. They were held in the hands or in muffs during long church services in unheated cathedrals. The whole culture of everyday life was permeated with the idea of preserving personal warmth. People were much more hardened and accustomed to low temperatures than we are. For them, comfort meant not a warm room, but a warm body. This strategy of personal survival was no less important than all the complex engineering systems of heating. We have looked at a whole arsenal of technologies that were used in the Middle Ages to combat the cold. From revived Roman hypocausts and complex wall ducts in monasteries, to the revolutionary invention of the fireplace and chimney, we have seen ingeniously effective ceramic stoves and sophisticated insulation systems using tapestries. All of this completely destroys the myth of the Dark Ages as a time of technological stagnation and primitive survival. Medieval engineers, masons, and stove builders possessed a deep practical knowledge of physics and thermodynamics. They could not always describe these laws with mathematical formulas, but they understood perfectly well how hot air behaves, how to accumulate heat in a mass, and how to combat heat loss. Their solutions were pragmatic, effective, and perfectly suited to the materials available. Why were many of these technologies forgotten or relegated to the background? This is partly due to the Renaissance. The new Renaissance aesthetic valued light, symmetry, and large spaces. Architects began to design buildings with huge windows to let in light. It was beautiful, but from a thermal engineering point of view, it was a disaster. These new palaces with high ceilings and giant windows were incredibly cold and drafty. Older, more efficient heating systems, such as massive stoves, did not fit in with the new aesthetic. In addition, many of these systems, such as hypocausts or air heating in castles, were incredibly expensive and difficult to maintain. They were only available to the wealthiest. With the change in social structure and the decline of certain institutions, such as orders of knights, knowledge about the construction of such systems could have been lost as there was simply no demand for them. The fireplace, as a simpler and cheaper solution, became widespread, replacing more complex but also more efficient systems. It was not until the 19th century, with the invention of steam and water heating, that engineers were able to surpass the solutions that their medieval colleagues had intuitively stumbled upon. Today, we are rediscovering many of these principles. The idea of a passive house, the use of thermal mass to store energy, radiant heating systems in floors and walls. All of these are modern reinterpretations of ideas that were successfully applied hundreds of years ago. Studying medieval heating systems is not just an excursion into history. It is a recognition of the genius of nameless craftsmen who, in difficult conditions, with only stone, clay, and wood at their disposal, were able to create comfort and ensure survival. They proved that engineering thought never stopped for a moment. This forgotten science was not magic, but the result of a long journey of trial and error, observation, and painstaking work. It was built into the very walls of buildings and into people's daily habits. It was a quiet but vital foundation on which the entire medieval civilization was built. We can see that the Middle Ages were far from primitive survival in the cold. It was a time of constant engineering exploration. From the revival of Roman hypocausts to the creation of efficient ceramic stoves and complex wall duct systems, medieval craftsmen demonstrated a deep understanding of the laws of physics. They knew not only how to generate heat, but also how to conserve it using insulation and architectural solutions. These forgotten technologies were the basis of survival, allowing society to develop and monks to preserve knowledge in warm scriptoria. This science was not flashy, but practical, built into the very stones of the buildings in which they lived. It proves that comfort and engineering were important to people in every era. What other aspects of medieval engineering or survival would you like us to cover in future episodes? Perhaps you are interested in water supply, bridge construction, or military engineering? Write your ideas in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next research.